So today we're going to be talking about how AI is going to change everything. And I think this is a topic that we're not seeing a lot of. And I see people downplaying the impact of AI. And I kind of think that people are missing the big picture here because this is very, very significant, like sci-fi movie significant. And we're going to talk a little bit about that with my guest today.
Welcome to The AI-Powered Business Leader. This is the show that helps business leaders excel in the rapidly evolving environment of AI integration and implementation. We go beyond the hype to provide practical solutions for real businesses. Whether you're facing challenges like developing a clear AI strategy, upskilling your workforce, or ensuring data privacy and compliance, we've got you covered. Here is your host, Alistair McDermott.
And today my guest is Justin Collery. Justin, you're welcome to the show.
Hi, Alistair. Great to speak with you.
So I love your show with my friend Frank. You guys have a show called The AI Argument, and I listen to it regularly. And so I'm going to have Frank on this show as well. But I know that you have a lot of great opinions about AI, so I want to talk to you about it.
Sure, I'd be delighted to. And I'm great to hear your intro because I totally agree with you that AI is, I cannot think of a single business or a single venture that isn't going to be completely transformed in the next 5 or 10 years.
I'm kind of shocked, to be honest, when I see conversations about AI. I'm just a little bit shocked at how people are kind of continuing on as if nothing has changed, where this huge thing is coming and it's going to change every level of our businesses, every level of our society. Like it's going to transform the human race, I guess. Like I don't want to overplay it either, but like it's pretty big.
Sometimes, Alistair, I feel like Leonardo DiCaprio in Don't Look Up, and I'm pointing at the sky and I'm saying, "Can you not see this thing? It's coming. It's right there. It's absolutely inevitable that this thing is going to come, and we need to start planning for it right now." And I wonder why it is that organizations don't seem to grasp it. I think there's a lot of plumbing and there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to build up around the AIs for let's say the person on the street to really start to feel it as being real. I do worry for people that don't recognize this, that it's going to come as a shock to them when changes really start to happen. But I think it's incumbent on our leaders, right, and the people who are in charge of businesses to really come to terms with what that change is going to mean. And then to set out a vision for, what is my business going to look like in 5 years' time? And how is this technology going to change it? And what should I be doing today in order to plan and to take advantage of the opportunities that this change is going to bring?
But I was talking to somebody who tried ChatGPT and it wasn't very good. So AI really isn't all that good.
Yes. So the thing you have to remember here, and I'm guessing that person tried ChatGPT maybe a number of months ago when they were using ChatGPT 3.5. So now they've made ChatGPT 4.0 freely available to everyone. You get a limited number of goes. And I have to do a huge shout out to Anthropic, who just yesterday released Claude 3.5, which is the best model on the market. And I would really strongly say to that person, go and try it again and use it. So there's that sort of level of interaction. And there's a beautiful graph. The thing about you really need to get your hands around or get your arms around is if you look at the state of the art back in 2019, 5 years ago, that was when there was ChatGPT 3, and that was terrible. But it was terrible, and yet already the researchers were saying this model is so powerful that we're not going to release it openly because we're worried that it can fake emails and fake human interaction too well. So they were already seeing it. We then had ChatGPT 4, and that was only, maybe 15, 16 months ago. Okay. And that was where people like me really started to get excited and get interested in the technology and go, okay, this is a game changer. And then yesterday you've got Claude 3.5. So you can see that there's a progression of capabilities, there's a progression of speed, and there's a huge reduction in cost. And it doesn't appear, there's nothing to say at the moment that that's going to change. And certainly there's an awful lot of money, like enormous resources are being put behind the development of the models, the training of larger models, the deployment of the hardware. And all of this is going to lead to a reduction in the price and an increase in the performance. So you have to consider, what was the performance 5 years ago with GPT-3? What was the intermediary steps that we got to get to today? And do you think that that's just going to stop? Or do you think that, we're going to get a GPT-5 and a GPT-6 over the next 5 years? And what are the capabilities likely to be for those models?
I think that so there was a document released by a guy called Leopold Aschenbrenner called
Yes.
Situational Awareness. He published it. It was like I think maybe it was you that described it, like it was like a PhD document.
Yeah.
It's about 200 pages, and it's describing the near future development of the technologies of AI. And he's deeply in that world. He's a very smart guy, and he's just talking about how there are no barriers to the capabilities, to the development of capabilities. I mean, the only real barrier that I can see that we could really face is lack of power, like
Correct.
literally electricity.
Yeah.
Everything else can pretty much be solved. And so what he's talking about is how the capabilities in terms of the reasoning, the effective IQ of the system, its ability to comprehend and understand, and being trained on more training data, that they will be getting better and better and better. And so when I'm talking to people and I hear them say, I tried it and it wasn't great, I find it a little bit frustrating because it's literally right now the worst it's ever going to be. And right now it's pretty damn good. When we look at the new release from Claude, and Claude, even before 3.5, was really, really good. Definitely my favorite for writing text. But now with the jump to 3.5, I think that it's probably leapfrogged with my very basic testing that I did this morning. I think it's probably leapfrogged ChatGPT 4, or ChatGPT 4.0. So these systems are continuously improving, and that pace of improvement is not going to stop. It's going to continue like this for the next year, for the next 2 years, for the next 5 years. And that's what I think is going to change everything, because it's going to change the way that we do business. It's going to change the way that our society runs, because we're simply not going to need as many employees. And like, that's going to have a massive impact on how our entire society functions.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things then I'd say to you around that. So yeah, that paper, it was amazing, and I totally agree with you. The power is the biggest impediment to progress. And there's a couple of other papers that came out recently as well that would sort of say the similar thing. So there was another paper where they got an AI. It wasn't a Chat GPT type AI, but they would train the AI to play chess. And so in chess, you've got this idea of elo, so that's how good you are playing chess. And they only trained it on chess players. They trained it using human chess players, and they only trained it on chess players up to 1,000 elo. And then they got the program to play chess itself, right? And what they found was that it would achieve a standard of 1,500 elo. So even though the training data only went up to 1,000, the actual AI afterwards went far beyond what was in the training data. And so what it was doing was, it was basically, if you think, it was the wisdom of crowds. So it had all this data from to various chess players, and obviously they made bad moves every now and then, but it was able to take out the bad moves and supplement it with a good move, and that increased its overall capabilities. Now, I think when you apply that same idea to all of the internet knowledge, so if you think, right, of all the disparate fields, so let's say I'm an expert in computers and you're an expert in marketing and somebody else might be an expert in some other field, right? The ability for us to progress the state of current knowledge is limited by our own field, right? We only know what we know ourselves. It's very hard for us to put bits of information together, but a large language model can. And so I would expect that using a similar thing where you've got like a chess AI that can achieve 1.5 times the capability of the data that it was trained on, because it's averaging out that data or it's taking learnings from different people. A very similar type of process will happen with just general knowledge and so on. So that's that's that part. The other thing I'd say to you that's complementary to what you spoke about there is Ilya Stutzker. So he just in the last number of days has set up a new company called Safe Superintelligence, SSI for short. And what's interesting to me about that is his original goal in OpenAI was to create AGI, artificial general intelligence. And his new company, which will have no products and is not going to release anything to the public until they've achieved safe super intelligence, is he's moved beyond AGI. It's no longer artificial general intelligence. He's now focused on artificial super intelligence. So that's intelligence beyond that of a human. And in that paper, situational awareness, I mean, in the interview that Leopold gave, he said it was quite clear the path to AGI, like that he knew, and a number of other people knew what would need to be done technically in order to achieve that. So that's where we are today. And then we come back to what you're talking about, about employees and stuff. And there's an awful lot we can unpack there, right? But the first thing I would say is if we go back to your example of the person who said, "Oh, I've used ChatGPT and I don't think it's very good." Well, the first thing is that where this makes an impact is not a chat interface, right? That's not where it's really going to make a difference. It's going to make a difference in the background. The best AI that you will ever use is the AI that you don't even know is there. So, for instance, if you are, I'll give you a use case actually. I mean, I think we talked about this before. So, a real practical use case is if there was, let's say, a service where I can just send it an email saying, "Here, I need my utility bills are up to be renewed. Can you just, here's all my bills. Can you just go and find me the best deal?" And in the background, it uses an agent to go and it looks at all the websites, looks at your bills, finds out which is the best deal, and then just goes and switches you. Right? And actually does it automatically every time. It just constantly monitors and goes, "Oh, I see Energia have reduced their prices. I'm just going to switch you." So you do nothing. Right? It's not a chat interface. It's not you saying, "I want you to do something." It's an agent in the background that I've kicked off to say, "Look, can you just make sure I always get the best deal?" And it does. And that type of thinking, right, where you have an agent in the background, if you apply that to your organization, that's where enormous efficiencies can be gained. So if you think about your organization and, whatever, I don't care what it is you do, and this is why it's going to change everything, right? It doesn't matter what your organization does, but just look at every step, every piece of friction, every place where somebody has to do a piece of work and break them down into little bits. And then you just start to automate them using agents. And the AIs that we have today, the AIs that exist now, AIs like Claude 3.5 are absolutely capable of automating not everything, but definite parts. And if you follow that path forward, till next year and the year afterwards, I mean, there was an interview with the CTO of OpenAI just yesterday where she said that in the next 18 months, they will release an AI that is the same intelligence as a PhD student. Now, I don't know any organization that employs only PhD students, but in 18 months, that's what you'll be able to do. So again, I come back to the point as leaders, as business leaders, you really need to start thinking about how is it I'm going to manage that transition from where I am today to having PhD students on call that I can just fire up to any task that I want them to get them to do.
Yeah, and I think like we're talking about some of the really practical stuff here, and I love talking about this well because there is the big picture, there's the utopian potential future, there's the dystopian potential future, but when it comes down to it, like what we need right now is we need to start implementing this day to day in business. And the way I see it, we have some pretty powerful tools already at our disposal, but the glue between those tools, that the bits that make them work together are very clunky. Me as a programmer, as a coder, I've been trying to set up some of these tools here locally, and it's just like frankly, it's a pain in the ass to set them up. And that's me coming with a tech background. I can't imagine somebody who doesn't have a tech background setting up current agents in the state that they're in currently. But yet I know that agents will probably be, I don't know if they'll be more important, but they'd be as important in the AI sense as the large language models, because they're the bits that, like, they're the hands that will allow the large language models with all their reasoning to actually go and take actions by visiting websites and doing things. So, how do you feel about where agents are at and where they're going?
I agree with you. There is an enormous opportunity for somebody somewhere to make, a piece of software which makes firing up agents easy, right, and repeatable. Um, and I mean, to me, that's going to look like a sort of a box, a GUI, where you more or less draw a process, and it's got certain inputs, it's got certain outputs, and you can probably chain them together. I mean, and LangChain doesn't do that, right? That's a sort of a technical product. It doesn't do it. There's other products. I haven't seen anything yet that does it, but there are practical steps that I think every leader should be taking right now in anticipation of a product like that becoming aware. So if I look at, and this is, I think, is especially true of small organizations rather than big organizations, right? So the promise of agents and the promise of AI is that with a 50-person company, I can actually do the work of 500 or 5,000 people, right? That's really the dream, right? How do you make your developer a 10x developer, or how do you make your salesperson a 100x salesperson, right? And you need to anticipate that that's going to happen, right? That's going to be possible in the near future.
And by the way,
And
not just in the near future. Like, we've already seen a case study from OpenAI in conjunction with Moderna, the company who make vaccines, and they've been using it deeply over the last year, 18 months. And the CEO or the CTO of Moderna said, we're going to be able to have the capabilities of a company with 100,000 employees with less than 10,000. So, like,
yeah,
that's the way they see it now. In that case study, it's really interesting to see all of their employees are on average having, I think it was 120 conversations per week. I did the maths, and it was something like each employee talks to ChatGPT once every 20 minutes in their workday, which is
yeah.
insane. Like, and that's the level that they have it integrated. And what that allows them to do is have this massive impact on productivity, not doing grunt work. Employees are no longer doing grunt work. So they're happy about the work that they're doing, and they're producing better work.
Okay, and that's a really good. I mean, Moderna are doing a stellar job. They are a poster child of how a leadership within a company, should start to implement AI within their company. So they've just given ChatGPT to everybody. In that case study, what was very interesting to me was that the legal department used it 100%. The legal department, and I think in a lot of bigger organizations, the legal department can be an impediment to adoption of this type of technology. So that was amazing to me, right? But the next step from that, right? So just giving GPT and the chat interface, right? That's, yes, you're going to get a big bump in productivity from doing that. But the next step is automating tasks. That's how you get that, 100x performance gain. Now, then as a leader, you have to ask, well, what is it my business does? Right? How do I serve my clients? And what is it that I know? Right. And the hardest but yet most valuable information in any organization is tacit knowledge. Knowledge that's in your head, and it's knowledge that's in my head. And so leaders, I think, should be thinking about ways to capture tacit knowledge. So we're having a conversation here, and as we talk about things, there's lots of questions being asked and answered, right? And in doing so, actually what I'm doing is I'm giving away some of my tacit knowledge. The easiest thing in the world to do would just be to record every meeting. Just record it and store it and keep it there. So let's put it in the context of, I'll give you a practical application now, right? Let's say we're developing a software product together, and you're the business person and I'm the technical person. And if we're using an agile way to develop software, there's going to be a lot of over and back between you and me, where you say, here, Justin, I want you to do this. And I'm going to say, well, why do you want to do that? Would you not do it a slightly different way? And you'll explain to me the business logic behind why you do something in a particular way. And eventually we'll agree to, okay, this is how we're going to implement it. Now, what I've actually got there is I've discussed the technical details and the reasoning, right? And you've discussed the business logic behind it. That's incredibly valuable information. And often what happens is, how does that get captured today in an organization, right? You might have a couple of bullet points from, meeting minutes, and maybe there's a couple of Jira tickets that get, created. But all of the really important knowledge, right? Your business knowledge and my technical knowledge is totally lost. And then 6 months from now, right, there's a terrible accident and both of us get run over by buses, and two new people come in, a new business person and a new technical person. How are they supposed to know why we did things in a particular way? Because that tacit knowledge has been lost. So the most valuable thing you could do is just record every meeting and just store the transcripts. And over time, what you'll find is you'll build a huge body of knowledge that's going to be incredibly valuable for when it gets to the point that you want to start automating your processes. Because then I know, right? So at the moment, I can use it as a look back tool. So I can say, why did we do that thing? Like, why do we make a decision to do X, Y, and Z? And I'll be able to know what was the reasoning behind it and so long. But in future, what you'll be able to do is say, this function does this, but now I need to augment it to be able to do something more. And the AI will be able to go back and look at the tacit knowledge and understand why something was done in a particular way, which is going to make it more able to take the next step. And this is kind of like a flywheel where, the more you know, the better you are at doing things faster. So that's the first thing, right? That's super important, that I just think is kind of lost. It's like such an easy thing. Why aren't people doing it now? And the second thing is, you have to reimagine your company and your business from the client's point of view. What points of friction are there? And because if you don't do this, somebody else is going to do it, and they're going to. And I'll give you a practical example in an insurance setting. So, and some companies in America have this already. But let's say you're insured and you've got car insurance, and I have a crash, right? I should be able to take a couple of photos, fill in a couple of forms. That can all be checked by AI. It can look at the photos, it can check the forms, and it can check your policy, and it can pay you straight away. It can just, I mean, if there was an insurance company out there that said, if you submit all your paperwork, it's all done electronically, and we guarantee to pay you within an hour, well, that's a huge point of friction gone for me, right? That's a big win for me as a client. And so all of us in our businesses have to look at what we do and how we do it, and reimagine what those businesses are going to look like in a world where AI is totally pervasive. And the person answering your phone call is a PhD student.
I love that. As a podcaster, so I've been podcasting for 4 or 5 years now, and I took my other podcast, The Recognized Authority, and I took the transcript. So I have 175 episodes of that podcast, and all of those are in-depth conversations of about 35 to 45, maybe even an hour long, with people who are absolute experts in their field. And people like best-selling authors, really top class people. And I was able to take that, transcribe all of those, and then get AI to distill and pull out all of the key insights. And so I was able to then take that, create a spreadsheet with all of the key insights, referencing the amount of times that each insight was mentioned. And then I was able to create like a league table of all of the top pieces of advice
That's
from
brilliant.
all of these people. And it's so powerful when you have transcripts. Another use case just for transcripts, and this would apply in a business setting. Where I used it was in a sports club. We run a charity run, which is a fundraiser for the club, for the rugby club here in Sligo. And so what I did was, with agreement of the other people at the meeting, during the planning meetings, I would record the entire meeting. And I was then able to take the transcript, turn that into notes, and then turn that into a field manual for running the entire. Because when you're running a charity run, there's a lot of moving parts about getting medical, getting Garda approval, changing the bus schedule because we're going to be blocking off the bus. There's so many different things. How many marshals do we need? Where are they going to be? Lots and lots of little details that you kind of forget year on year. We were able to take the meeting notes from 3 or 4 of those meetings, and now we have a manual where it's printed out and it's like, this is everything you need to do. Here's when you need to do it. And we don't need to remember that anymore. It
Isn't that
makes
just
life so much easier.
that's a great use case, right? And so let's take it to the next step, right? So you have all your manual, then you can say, look, can you come up with an action plan, please? Tell me, what is it that we need to be doing and when do we need to do it, right? So that's your co-pilot, right, for your event. And then
Mm-hmm.
every week you can just go, okay, what is it that we need to do this week? And it's there just guiding you through the process. And as issues come up, say, oh, look, at this thing happened. What should we do about it? I mean, think of how easier it makes just to organize a simple charity event, to do things like that.
Mm. Yeah.
But that's totally applicable in every scenario. There is nothing in business that I can't imagine that would not benefit from a similar type of setup.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, so then we say, okay, so now we agree on the value of transcribing calls, transcribing meetings. We're talking now about a societal change where everything that we say at work is being recorded all the time and transcribed. Um, that that's a lot for people to wrap their heads around. Like, do we really want to do that?
Yeah, I think, well, you see, I think there's a societal change. You're totally correct, right? So And I think a positive societal change. That's my personal view. And I think what happens is you get a very strong delineation between on the record and off the record conversations. So when we're having a serious conversation, it's going to be recorded, and you understand that it's going to be recorded. And everybody knows, right? In order to facilitate a good meeting, there's always the 10 or 15 minutes beforehand where you're catching up with people and you're just sort of, having banter, and maybe just sort of everybody's getting relaxed. And you're not going to record that part, right? And then you're going to hit the big red button, you're going to record, and then you've got your business meeting. And then you end it and you have another conversation and off you go. So that's one change I think that will happen. But the positive thing that I see, that one of the things that professionally frustrates me, is that it cuts out a lot of politicking, for instance, within large companies. And, it's because, again, I imagine in the future, and not the distant future, I imagine these AIs to be active participants in the meetings. So if there's a disagreement or something about why a decision was made, or was this discussed previously, or, why have we done a thing this way, you could just turn around to the AI and say, here, give it a name, Alfred. Hey, Alfred, can you tell me, when was this discussed before and what was the decision? And that just shortcuts a whole load of arguments. It's not like being down in the pub with your mates having a couple of pints, where it's fun not to have your phone and to argue over who won the World Cup in 1966, right? It's a different type of conversation in a professional setting. And to me, like, what is the purpose of a business meeting, right? What are you trying to do, right? You're trying to get to the truth in the shortest, fastest time that you can. You want everybody to be heard, but you don't want to be going around in circles. So I think this is a great aid to that. But I do think it changes the culture, but not in a bad way. I look forward to it.
So transcripts, clearly a great place to start. And I know, like, when we got on our last call, we were on Zoom. We're not on Zoom right now. We're in a recording studio, but we were on Zoom last time, and I brought my note taker in. It recorded the whole meeting, and it showed a little message that came up and said, "Hey, Alistair is recording this meeting for note taking purposes." And you saw it and you just carried on, because that's how it works, right?
Yeah.
And that's going to become ubiquitous. That's going to be something that just everybody does. In fact, I see it now where I'm having Zoom meetings and somebody's note taker will join before they do.
Isn't it interesting that isn't it interesting, the sort of a serendipity or synchronicity that COVID happened, and we all became so familiar and so easy with having meetings over Zoom, whereas pre-COVID, if somebody joined over Zoom, it was kind of, oh, would you not make an effort to be there or whatever. COVID has trained us all to be totally comfortable with having a conversation like this and not in person, which is just a happenstance of history.
I love it, because I've been doing this for a very, very long time. One of my first jobs out of college, I worked for a multinational called Sun Microsystems, and my boss was living in Kansas. I was in Dublin. One of my teammates was in London in the UK, and we had teammates in the East Coast of the US. We had teammates in Austin, Texas, and in San Francisco. So that was back in 2001, and we worked remotely all the time. I'm really glad the rest of the world caught on and caught up with that, because it's just such a great way to work. I like the fact that I can work from a beautiful place in the west of Ireland and still work with people all over the world. But it certainly has paved the way for this kind of remote interaction. It's also paved the way potentially for, rather than people to appear themselves, it's potentially your avatar could be joining a call at some point in the future. And so your avatar is an AI who looks like you and has access. So you're Alfred. So it
Yep.
could be Justin Alfred, and they join the call and say, "Look, sorry, Justin can't make it today, but I'm here to answer any questions that you might have for him."
Again, that's a really good use case, right? So we're all really busy, right? I'm sure that it certainly frustrates me when people stomp on your calendar and you've got 5 different meetings at the same time and you can't go to all of them. So you can have your avatar turn up for that meeting. Exactly as you say, the avatar is there to answer questions, but the avatar is also there to hear things from your perspective and from your ear. So your avatar knows what you're concerned about. It knows everything about you. And so at the end of the meeting, right, you can imagine, think about your routine today, right? The first thing that I do certainly is I come in, check my messages, check my emails, see what's lined up for the day, and then get working. You can imagine that you're going to have a similar routine at the end of the day where you have a conversation with your avatar to say, okay, of all the meetings that I missed, is there anything that's really important? What do I need to know? and it sort of gives you that information. So it's a great way of enabling silos in big organizations is a big issue. And it's a great way of breaking down silos, because now I can be in 5 different places at the same time and then just get the information. I'm not getting meeting minutes, which are kind of bland. I'm not having to listen to an entire recording. My avatar knows what I'm concerned about. It knows what I'm interested in, and it knows how I like to consume. That's another great use case of AI, which is, you could take your content as a podcaster, but also in a professional setting. Different people consume information in different ways. I like bullet points. Other people like stories. Some people, they like the information presented to them in a different way. You could take your podcast and you could disseminate that tailored to the individual consumer's desire and how they want to receive that information. And not, of course, in the language. So even if I'm in a multilingual organization, and there are people, and they're all speaking Spanish or whatever, my avatar can listen in, interpret the entire meeting, and then give it back to me in English, which again is a great boon for productivity and just being able to allow people to interact with each other.
And your avatar can speak every language fluently.
Yes.
That's another big one. So, like, I know that a lot of this kind of sounds like sci-fi to people watching or listening, but a lot of this sci-fi is very close or is actually reality already. I can already take a video recording of, say, this podcast, and I can put it up and upload it into a tool which will then translate it and have me speaking with my mouth synchronizing with the words correctly in fluent German or Japanese or Spanish or any language you can think of. And that's all possible with today's technology. There's nothing there. Now, I'm not saying it's easy or it's quick. And so some of these things can be a little bit slow and clunky. And, I know that one of the frustrating things that people find is they see some amazing stuff that's being created with AI, particularly some of the AI generated videos or the AI generated images. And then they go to use the tools and they find that what's getting output, it doesn't look anything like what they thought was going to get output. And that's because people like Frank Prendergast, who's our friend, who will also be on the show at some point, people like him learn how to use these tools, and it takes time, and also they iterate. They it's a trial and error right now with these systems, but they are genuinely producing this output, and these systems are going to get better and better and quicker and quicker.
And Alistair, we've been here before, right? We've been here before many, many times. So if you're in, anywhere in 1998 and you were trying to buy a book online, right, it would be very hard for many different reasons. You would be probably using a dial-up connection, which was very slow and didn't work and was expensive. Your computer monitor was, not very, good, and it took up half your sitting room. And the websites probably just had a picture of a toaster flying across the screen or something like that. The infrastructure wasn't there, and it would have been very difficult for you. But yet 5 years later, in 2003, Amazon existed, and the process of being able to buy books and do commerce online had moved forward. And again, I come back to you say you're shocked at how little people understand just how much this is going to change their lives, and I absolutely agree with you. I am constantly shocked, and it seems to me that what we're lacking at the moment is a vision of the future. And do business leaders have a clear vision of how this is going to change the way that they interact with their clients? And so again, I go back to that that .com type period where you had Barnes and Noble versus Amazon, right? So Barnes and Noble sold books, and they thought the best way to serve their clients was to have beautiful bookstores that you could go in and whatever, maybe even buy coffee and stuff like that. And Amazon didn't. They had a totally different vision of the future, which was that a book is a commodity, and the cheapest, easiest way to buy a book is on the internet with one click. And they realized that actually they're in the logistics business, which is that as soon as you click, something has to happen really quickly. And nowadays they've got it down to they will deliver to you within the same day. Or if you look at, the difference between Blockbuster and Netflix, the classic example. So again, I'm sure Blockbuster had a website, but they didn't, take it to the next level and say, well, actually, the easiest way for our clients to interact with our content is just to stream it straight to their computer. People are inherently lazy at the end of the day. They want to take the easiest route to get something done. And so from a leader's point of view, how does this revolutionize the way that I interact with my clients? How has this happened in the past? And And then just to your point about, there's lots of companies and it's hard, it's clunky because again, it's like the internet back in the 90s. And there's an awful lot of money which has been plowed into trying. This is the really creative phase of the technology cycle, and I'm absolutely sure that we'll go through dot AI bust, because what happens is you get enormous amounts of capital being thrown at thousands of companies, and they're all just trying to figure out what the best way is to interact with this technology. How do you integrate it into our processes? And it's hard, and 90% of them will fail, but the 10% that succeed will be truly successful companies. And so a visionary leader today, will be thinking deeply about how do they put themselves into that 10%.
So one of the things, like, it is clunky right now. And like, I remember, I was building websites. I think you were building websites 3 or 4 years before I was. I was building websites in around 1995, 96. And like, that was the early days. That was the dawn. I think you were there pre-dawn building websites in 90.
93 was,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, like, it was hard to build websites back then, and the only people who could do it were people with a software development background, because the tools didn't exist. We literally had to hand code things. And I kind of feel like that's where we're at right now with things, particularly like agents, which are going to be massive, but are really clunky to use right now, and only people like software developers can build them right now. But that's going to change. So the question I have based on that is, why should a business leader not just wait? Like, why should they start to take action on AI right now when it's going to be much easier to use it in 6, 12, 18 months time?
So, I mean, that's a great question. Because sometimes doing nothing is the right thing to do. Okay, but we've already discussed, right, that even if you don't make technical moves to take advantage of the technology, there are practical moves like transcribing all your meetings, right, capturing the information, distilling it. Those are practical things you can do today. My view of any organization is that you should be giving the technology to your employees. So even if you're not going to, change the way that you operate today, give them ChatGPT or give them Claude. You're going to make your employees more productive just by doing that. And what I think is, there's going to be a push and a pull within an organization. So you're going to have from the top down, right? You're going to have leaders are developing a vision of, okay, this can really change our business and this is how we're going to do it. And that's going to be the pull, right? But I think if you give tools like ChatGPT to everybody in the organization, there's also a push where employees are going to, will recognize quickly which are the repeatable parts of the processes that they're doing. And then you go, cool, let's write a piece of software that just automates that one piece of the process, because you're just doing the same thing. And your employees will tell you which bits those are. And they don't want to be doing boring, monotonous stuff over and over again. They want to be doing interesting work. So there's going to be a push and a pull. So there are practical things that you can do today, knowing that the tools of tomorrow are going to automate a lot of that work.
There's two things I want to follow up on that. The first is that, making these tools available to your employees. So Microsoft found in a study with LinkedIn recently that many people are already using the tools, whether you give them or not. They may be using those tools themselves, and they call it "bring your own AI to work," and it's this is a problem because, if you're in EU or you have EU clients, you're probably violating GDPR if they're putting in client information in there. We already saw a thing where Samsung employees put meeting notes and transcriptions into ChatGPT, and it had proprietary, I think it had client information and it had proprietary intellectual property. And basically they lost the rights to that because it was in the terms of service for ChatGPT that they were using, that they could train the model on it. And so these are the risks that people they're probably already using them. And that's and that's a risk. So your employees are probably already using them, even if they're not, putting those tools in their hands is a good idea, but also having some level of control over it, putting guidelines, processes in place, all like all of the really boring kind of governance stuff that's actually really crucial, because your employees are probably, if you're not, like, your best employees are probably using AI already, because that's the way they think. They're good people, and they want to use the best tools available to them. So that's my warning to business owners. Like, they're probably using it already if you
Well,
haven't made it available.
for sure, right? And those are valid concerns, right? And I mean, I would put on two hats, right? I'm going to put on my corporate hat and I'm going to put on my entrepreneur hat. So on my corporate hat, right, absolutely valid concerns. You need to be really concerned about that sort of stuff. There are, Microsoft give you, and OpenAI have enterprise licenses where they guarantee that they will not train their models on their data. They are medical compliant. They are, they will co-sign agreements with you to make sure that that data is treated in an appropriate way and that they don't store the data or save it. And Amazon will do exactly the same for you as well. So there are ways for you to mitigate those risks. And I would say you just have to, it's imperative for your organization to do that. That's my corporate hat. On my entrepreneur hat, I would say to you, there are enormous opportunities, because you should know that every really big organization is going to be totally concerned about security, privacy, all of these things which are going to slow down innovation in those really big companies. So if you're a small company, you have none of those shackles. You can innovate at a light speed compared to a big organization. So if you can spot an opportunity, your chances of selling a service or a product to a big organization are never going to be better than in the next 2 or 3 years, because your speed of development is going to be light years ahead of the speed of development in a big organization. So there's huge entrepreneurial opportunities there also.
Yeah, and to speak to the corporate hat version of you, I
Yeah,
completely agree, and like, the all of the AI providers know that they won't get widespread adoption if they don't take the privacy question seriously. Like, they know that just it won't happen, so they have to take it seriously. But that only works if you were signing up as a business and you're signing up to one of the licenses where they offer that. If you look at all of the personal level, where you sign up as an individual, even if you're paying, usually there's something in there that says, we're going to train on your data unless you tell us otherwise. And the risk factor for you as a business leader is if one of your employees is using one of these personal level accounts, because you haven't put the professional level tools in front of them. That's where I see the risk, and that's why I think it's really important for organizations like at the enterprise level, or even like small businesses who have a number of employees. That's why I think you have to put the tools in their hands and have control over them, and have that guidance and governance.
sure. I mean, and there's a number of ways you can do it. Now, I would push back a little bit and say that Anthropic in particular have guaranteed that they will not train on your data unless you specifically opt in to have your data used to train their models.
Mhm.
So, if you're concerned, I certainly would take a close look at Anthropic. And of course, you can always block those websites at a corporate level. Say, we're not going to give you any access, and you can provide, through APIs, you can, now, I would argue that's not a good way to go, because I think, again, what makes, again, if I come back to the what's going to happen to many, if not all industries, which is there's going to be a changing of the guard. And what's the difference between a big company and a small company? So if you've got Moderna doing the work of 100,000 people with 10,000 people, and then you've got Pfizer who actually have the 100,000 people. Well, what's the difference, right? Why can't Moderna kick Pfizer's ass with their 10,000 people? And the reason is history, right? It's all of that knowledge, right? It's all of that, again, tacit institutional knowledge that Moderna just don't have, because they don't have that number of people. So if I am Moderna, I don't want to be rewriting chatbots, right? And rewriting stuff which I can get from free from Microsoft or from OpenAI or from Anthropic. I need to be focusing on, where does this deliver value? So the idea, I mean, I could control access using an API. I could block access to all of these tools and say you only are allowed to use it through this API. I don't think that's the right way to go, though. I think you just have to say, what is the best protection I can get using the tools out of the box that I can get my hands on. And once I've done that, then how do I actually operationalize the automation of tasks within my organization? Because that's where the value really is.
There's one last topic that I want to discuss with you, because I think this is like discussing the kind of one of the most important things is operationalizing. I don't know, is all of this information, all of the documents, all of the transcripts. So you've already got all of your, like, let's say you've got your marketing department has a bunch of documentation about marketing. You've got product spec sheets, you've got internal documents about your products, your services. All of these documents are in different places and need to be brought together into some sort of single repository of, or maybe not. Maybe you keep them siloed because you don't want, you want to keep them separate because you want to give different levels of access, because maybe you've got, different levels of security within your organization. Like, you don't want to put all your employee salaries, for example, in there, because you don't want to be able to pull that kind of stuff out. So I think that document management and updating this internal repository is going to become very, very important. The way those documents are sorted, named, laid out internally within the documents, so that an AI can read it and understand the context and the priorities. Can you tell me, have you thought about this? How do you see that? Is this a problem?
It is a problem. It is a problem, as in the concern that you've voiced is an absolutely valid concern, right? So, but it's a problem that's been solved already, and we just need to piggyback on that solution. So, I'm a strong believer that the problem is that there's all this data and it's in different places. But there's some data that you've got access to, and there's some data that I have access to. Well, that's already been solved as an issue, right? So we have SharePoint, we've got AD groups, we've got security profiles. There's all sorts of different ways where we manage people's access to data day to day already. You use exactly the same mechanisms again. So what I would imagine that the technical solution to this is that I will have this thing called a vector database, and we don't need to go into it, but it's a key component of being able to look up documents and pull out relevant information to help the AI answer questions. So there will be a vector database which sits on my machine, and that is a vector database, or a knowledge store of everything that's on my machine. And if you've got a SharePoint site, there's a vector database on the SharePoint site, and that contains all the knowledge that's on that SharePoint site. But only within, let's say, that particular, because SharePoint sites are split up into different areas with different levels of access. So if I have access to that SharePoint site, then I also have access to that vector database. And when I ask a question of my AI, it knows which vector databases it can communicate with in order to get the answers back. So this is it's a gimme, right? There's no extra work to be done to control your information, except I tell you an interesting point for you too. Just do what you do already, right? Just make sure that the users have the correct level of access, and then just have the AI only have access to the same information. The concern that I hear in some corporates is that we don't know what people have access to. So we're worried that if we create, in this instance, a better search engine for internal documentation, people will suddenly start to find out that they do have access to everybody's salary, even though they didn't know it, because there's some loophole in the security. And the issue there isn't the AI. The issue there is your security. So you got to tackle the problems at their root. And I would say, by the way, that I did discuss this with an architect in one organization, and they were like, a vector database on machine. Because I'll give you another great use case for AI is if you are, let's say, working in many different industries, right? You get a document, a form in, and you have to take the information that a user has either written or typed into a form, and you have to transcribe it onto your internal system, right? And that's just a regular thing. A lot of people do that type of work, data entry type of work. Now, an AI will just read the form and just pop it in. It's the easiest thing in the world to do, right? And it would be a simple plugin. And they're like, oh, AI running locally on your machine. I can see lots of issues around that. And people, it just feels wrong. Inertia is a huge issue to the adoption of AI. But if you look at what OpenAI have done recently, is they have released a local version of OpenAI for your Mac, where it can look at your screen and it can do stuff. And they'll soon, I'm sure, have one for Windows as well. And it's a very logical next progression that they will then have a store of information, this thing called a vector database locally on your machine, and it will interact with that store. So as you're chatting with ChatGPT, even though it's on the cloud, it will also be able to interact with all of the documents that you have locally on your machine. And then as an extension, maybe every network drive or every SharePoint or everything, but it's based on your access. And that's how you solve the security issue.
Yeah. Well, I think that this will be solved. I think that it may change how we format documents. So, for example, I think that we may now need to add more context to a document that's not there for the humans reading it, but it's there for the AI reading it, so that it understands, okay, this is connected to this other thing, and here's some meta information about that. Because I think that this will get very complicated, because there's such a vast number of documents. Like I, as a single person in my business, have generated tens of thousands of documents over a decade. And if you multiply that out in an organization, how many documents people are creating, all the duplication, some of them will have incorrect information in there. There's a lot of different issues there that will impact on this. So I think sorting the actual format, like the file format, versus the internal format, like do you use headings, is there meta information, all of that will impact on how efficient and how effective the AI is able to process those documents.
And AI can help you do that. So I've run a project already where I took thousands of legal documents, so court cases, and I've gone through and I've classified the court cases, identified the area of law that the court case related to, the arguments that were used, whether the arguments were successful or not. So you can use AIs as a classifier for information in order to generate exactly metadata, and that metadata might be stuff like when the document was created or when it was last updated, because more recent documents are obviously going to be more likely to be correct than older documents. And then you can extract all sorts of other metadata in it as well, and then you use those correctly. I mean, as a way to get to that. That's, I mean, a key issue here, and it's a very technical one though, is getting to the right information. So the context windows of LLMs are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and some people believe that that's going to be a solution to identifying the right piece of information. So Gemini has a context window now of 2 million tokens, which is just enormous. And so maybe you can just retrieve all the documents, throw them into the context window, and let the AI decide which ones are the right ones or not. And then other people, and I'm not decided on what the right way is here. Other people are like, well, I'm sort of intellectually drawn to this a bit, which is, rather than giving it an enormous amount of text, right, just give it what's really important and ask it to focus on those bits. The right answer isn't known yet, right? That's why this is an exciting time, because it's everybody's has an opportunity to make a real difference here, because we don't know what the right answers are.
Yeah, I think, like, the way I think of it is the old Rumsfeld expression, it's unknown unknowns. And that's the field we're in at the moment, is like, we don't know what we don't know. And not only that, but the unknowns are changing exponentially, so it's an
And the
interesting place
goalposts
to
are
be.
moving, and the
Yeah,
goalposts are moving every 6 months. I mean, the biggest thing you don't know is, what are the capabilities of these models going to be 12 months from now? All you know
yeah.
is they're going to be better, but how
They're
much
gonna
better?
be they're gonna be better. They're gonna be a lot better. I think where we're lagging right now is the glue, the pieces that are tying things together. I can see the capabilities in terms of intelligence and reasoning, and writing and matching our voice and all that kind of stuff. I can see those improving, massively. But right now, where we're missing is the glue pieces, to tie these things together to make them more practical and more useful. But that will come as well.
I totally agree, and a lot of those glues are internal anyway, right?
Hmm.
So and so it's the glue and the tooling are the
Yeah.
two things, right, that we're missing right now, but they will come, and we need to prepare now, right? As I said, we need a vision for how this is going to change our business, because the change is happening. It's happening around us now. We don't be a boiling frog. We need to think about what we're going to do over the next 5 years to make best use of this technology.
Well, Justin, I think that's a good place to leave it. And thank you for giving me so much of your time. Where can people find you if they want to learn more?
Sure, you can get me on LinkedIn. Just look for Justin Collery. I'm also on Twitter. If you look for Justin Collery, that's where I post my random thoughts. Or you can reach out to me, justin.collery@wi-pipe.com.
And definitely check out the AI Argument, which is your podcast with Frank Prendergast, because that's great crack as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Alistair, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. I hope to go talk again soon.
Cheers. Thanks so much.